I don't know if you saw the report in a Chinese portal Sohu. They reported that in the event of an attack on Kaliningrad, nothing will remain of Europe. They're talking about 34 million people will die in 5 hours. Do you think that the things that can get that crazy, somehow?
Who's that crazy? Who's that crazy?
No, this is a report on the Chinese portal.
So what I'm saying is, do I think who's that crazy?
I'm talking about Europeans, basically German and the United Kingdom.
They need to understand they will cease to exist. I just did an interview. I don't want to give it away too much because I want people to watch it, with Sergei Karaganov. He's a very noted Russian thinker, very influential. He wrote a paper a couple of years ago where he postulated the notion that the United States would not trade Boston for Poznan. And what he's saying is that Russia needs to preemptively hit Europe with nuclear weapons, because he doesn't believe the United States will sacrifice America for this crazy Europe. Now, he made that back when Biden was president. He made that statement. Today we have Trump, and it's clear. Understand, Scott Bessent has told the Europeans that if Russia attacks a European country, the Article 5 response from the United States will be to sell NATO weapons, but not to get involved militarily. All right? And now we have a situation where Europe is deliberately provoking Russia in contravention of the policy direction desired by the President of the United States. So now, if NATO attacks Kaliningrad, the Russians will immediately annihilate Europe. 34 million dead, if you're lucky, could be more. And there won't be a damn thing the United States will do about it, because we're not going to sacrifice 150 million Americans for the stupidity of Europe. And people need to stop blaming Russia for this. Russia's the one that actually, they're the only ones out there with an arms control plan. They want to extend New START. The United States isn't responding to that. Russia is willing to sit down and talk about any aspect of anything as long as it's done within a framework that respects the legitimate national security interests of Russia. So people have to start asking us, what are you willing to die for if you're European right now? Because if you allow the insanity of the Poles, of the Balts, of the Germans to manifest itself, because remember, Germany has a brigade right now in Lithuania. It's a joke of a brigade. It can't do anything. But my God, we have German tanks in Lithuania posturing to fight the Russians. Is this 1943 all over again? Yes, it is. But you had General Donahue talk about, well, we can shut out the lights in Kaliningrad. No, we can't. General Donahue, no, you can't. First of all, I've said this. I said it at the time. I'll say it again. General Donahue, if he's the commander of NATO forces, will be dead within an hour of NATO forces striking Kaliningrad, because the Russians will just simply take out his command and control facility with a nuclear weapon, and he'll be dead. And so will all the nuclear planners. And then shortly thereafter, the political leadership of Europe will be annihilated as well, as Russia will immediately destroy Europe. Not a single major European city will be left standing. Why? Because Europe poses a threat to Russia, an existential threat. And you don't let rabid dogs run free in your cities. I've said this all along. Russia will become the modern day equivalent of Atticus Finch, and they will pull out the rifle reluctantly, and they will put a bullet through the skull of the rabid dog that is Europe today. I mean, this is harsh talk, but my God, this is what we're talking about. This isn't a joke anymore. This isn't, posturing. Russia's not weak. I mean, Seymour Hersh is a very good friend of mine. I love the man to death, and I have the highest respect for him as a journalist. But he has allowed himself to be hijacked by U.S. sources that just promulgate bullshit, straight up crap. And he's written an article now that, he does say that in the opinion of U.S. sources. But why give them a platform? Because the impression is that you agree with them. And these sources are the Russian army is in disarray. No, not even close. The Russian army is a fully functioning war machine that has, mastered the art of modern day high intensity conflict. I mean, can you point to, a problem here, a problem there? Of course you can. When you have 710,000 soldiers on the line carrying out, intensive combat, there will be people who don't perform well. There will be people who decide they don't want to be there. There will be this, that, and the other thing. But hell, that happens everywhere. I mean, do we judge the United States military because in 1944 we had American soldiers drop their weapons and desert the battlefield? Does that show that there is a systemic problem in the American military? Or is the American military one of the finest fighting forces ever formed at that time and went on to defeat Nazi Germany on the Western Front? The Russians right now are pretty damn good at what they do. They're very good at what they do. A military in disarray. What about the Rubicon Center? This is the drone warfare unit that the Ministry of Defense has created. An elite force, and even the Ukrainians are like, we can't touch these guys. They're created to kill Ukrainian drone operators. When Rubicon shows up, the Ukrainians know they're about to die, because that's what happens. The supremacy of drone warfare. This is what Pete Hegseth and Army Secretary Driscoll say they want the Americans to be, but the Americans aren't even anywhere close to this. We can't even touch what the Russians are doing right now. Then the Russians have consolidated a drone fighting force into an unmanned vehicle group. It's a new service. The Ukrainians did it. Ukrainians are pretty damn good too. I mean, in some cases they're probably better in certain tactical applications, but the Russians have caught up and surpassed them, and strategically the Russians are dominating this. A military in disarray doesn't do that. The Russians have the ability, they're the quickest turnaround in terms of learning the lessons of war. The Russians are rotating their troops out of the front line on a regular basis. That means that the troops are well rested, and when they rotate out, in addition to resting, and re-equipping, they get retrained based upon the most recent doctrinal lessons that are gathered from the battlefield, taken to the Russian general staff academies and their other fighting academies, where they train, they come up with doctrine, they update it, bring it back down to the training centers. So you could have done an assault on Pokrovsk, captured the town. The lessons that you learned from that battle are taken up to the General Staff Academy while you're rotated out to get rest and re-equipped. And before you come back in, there will be a training academy that trains you on adapting the lessons that you learned. And then you go back in and you fight. Nobody in the world can do that. That's not a military in disarray. That's a military that knows what the hell they're doing. And they're pretty damn good. They're not exhausted. Would they like the war to end? Who wouldn't want the war to end? Everybody wants this war to end. But the Russians will not accept the war ending without victory. And victory is defined by, the Russian leadership, who has the full support of the Russian people. Is the Russian economy suffering? Did you watch Vladimir Putin's, 3+ hour question and answer this morning? How many of those questions were about the economy? A whole bunch of them. And was this an economy that's thriving? Or are people calling up saying, hey, there's problems here. There's a taxation burden. There's shortages of fish. You're going through it. Is the Russian government hiding any of this? No. They actually created a forum for the entire world to watch, where Russia's economic problems are put out there, where they discussed everything, to include the Russian central bank and the role that it plays in handling inflation. And Vladimir Putin is sitting here saying, we have problems. We're adjusting to this. We have to make adjustments here. We have to do that. That's a deficiency here. We're working on this here. He's not trying to fake people out. But what you're seeing is a nation that is functioning at every level. Functioning. There are problems. Who wouldn't have problems? 20 tranches of sanctions put on Russia from Europe, the seizure of $240 billion of their national assets, the United States sanctioning energy, disrupting, how they derive income. Who wouldn't have issues? But Russia, I've been there, and Cy, I'd recommend you go there too and not talk to people in Washington, D.C. who have never been there. It's not a failing society. It's a thriving society. They have some issues, but they are thriving. Thriving because these are Russian patriots. There is no seething under mass of, disenchanted Russians praying for the demise of Putin. Gilbert Doctorow just, he's just wrong, fundamentally wrong on this. And there's no one that shares his opinion except these U.S. officials who are so disconnected from reality, it's not even funny. But no, Russia's not in disarray. The military is not in disarray. The economy is functioning. As Vladimir Putin said, people like to point out, certain statistics about inflation rates, but inflation's dropping. I love one. There was an article that just recently came out about the life expectancy of the average Russian male is 68. That's not good. Could be better. It was 57 in 1998. 57. And now it's 68 while Russia's in a war where they're losing some men. 68. How did you go from 57 to 68? That means a lot of really good things are happening in Russia. Good things that are making life, that's reversing a trend. You don't reverse, life expectancy overnight. It takes time to change the societal ills that created this to begin with. Vladimir Putin has done that. And Russia today is a nation on the right trajectory. Mortgage rates, they're talking, 20% for mortgage rates. Yeah, gosh, I remember in 1980, 81, American mortgage rates were close to 20% as well. Was our society about to collapse? No, economic trouble. But they don't mention that most of the people that need to buy homes right now get the preferential 6% mortgage rate. So yeah, there's a high mortgage rate out there. But for the people that really need the houses, they get 6% mortgage rates. So again, people just don't know Russia. They don't understand the Russian economy. They don't understand the Russian reality. They cherry pick data. I love the one, a certain percentage of Russians don't have, functioning, plumbing. Yeah, because they live in the freaking far north. You know what happens to plumbing in the far north? Outdoor plumbing? It freezes. Pipes blow up. So that's why they don't have the things they've adjusted to that. It's Russian reality, guys. But you go to Moscow, everybody's got a flushing toilet. It's a modern place. You go to any modern Russian city, I've been there. Gilbert, I don't know. I guess he goes to St. Petersburg, Moscow, but maybe Gilbert should get out to the real Russia and see it before he opens his mouth. And maybe U.S. officials should do the same. Get the U.S. embassy people to leave their embassy building in Moscow and travel around Russia and get a true survey of the reality of Russia. Because the reality of Russia is far different than what's being portrayed in the Western media, what's being portrayed by Seymour Hersh, who parrots, U.S. sources who don't know anything about Russia. The Russian, Vladimir Putin, the idea, I love this one. He put out the 6 points that the Russians are apparently conceded to Driscoll, who now is a rock star. He's the Army Secretary of, the Secretary of Army. He's 36 years old, doesn't know squat. He was a first lieutenant, has limited combat experience, but now he's the Secretary of the Army. Oh, by the way, in addition to being the Secretary of the Army, he's also the head of the Bureau of ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Now, I haven't quite figured out how that one works yet. And what it does on his workload. But apparently this guy's a rock star who, is suddenly taking over the Ukraine thing, and he's worked miracles. My God, he went to Abu Dhabi where he met with the Russians. Do you know the truth about what happened there? Budanov and the head of the GRU were meeting in Abu Dhabi to talk about exchanging dead bodies, because that's what they do. And Driscoll showed up unannounced and tried to sit on it and tried to have conversations with the Russians that they weren't authorized to have with him. And from this, suddenly we're being told that the Russians aren't going to accept a Ukrainian army of 600,000. Well, I don't know. I listened to Vladimir Putin yesterday and this morning. Did you? There won't be a Ukrainian army that size. The Russians won't agree to it. The Ukrainian army was 260,000 strong when this war began. And that was a NATO-trained army that Russia said ain't going to be allowed to survive. Today, they have 800,000 NATO-trained soldiers today? You think Russia's going to let that survive? No, the Ukrainian army would be 50 to 60,000, non-NATO affiliated, non-NATO trained. But according to Seymour Hersh's U.S. sources, This is the reality that Putin's going to allow this to happen because he's lost control of the war. His generals are against him. His generals aren't against him. Who the hell came up with this stupidity? The Russian population has turned on. He won the election last year with the largest mandate of any elected Russian official, and it was a legitimate election. In wartime, he swept it. The Russian people said, "You're the man, you're the guy we trust, you're the one we want to lead us out of this mess." Are there problems in Russia? You're damn right there's problems in Russia. There's always been problems in Russia. He inherited a basket case. And for 25 years, he's been working really hard to fix it. But he's been stabbed in the back every step of the way by the West that doesn't want him to succeed. Why do you think he went to Munich in 2007? Because the West loves Russia, was doing it. Why do you think there was a war in Chechnya? Because the CIA was working with the Chechens to create unrest, to break Russia apart. So this entire time that Putin's been in charge, he has been carrying the burden of a collective West that sought his demise, that sought to bring him down. Navalny was a CIA and British asset. There's a videotape of Navalny's deputy saying, "I need $10 million to undermine Russian democracy." Or you guys don't want to remember that, do you? You don't want to know anything about the reality of Navalny. 100% CIA-controlled goon. They're not a representative democracy, none of that. This was the conspiracy of the West to attack democracy, and then when Russia adjusted to survive, to say, look how undemocratic Russia is. Guys, it's just wrong. All of it's wrong. Joe Biden traveled to Moscow in 2011 and met with the Russian opposition in Moscow during an election year and said that it would be bad for Vladimir Putin to run for president again. Could you imagine Dmitry Medvedev coming to the United States and saying, no, it would be really bad for J.D. Vance to run for president 2028. The Americans would go, well, gee, thanks for coming and telling us this. Or would we run him out, tar and feather and run him out of the country for interfering? Joe Biden went there and said that to them. How do you think the Russians respond to that? How do you think they respond to Hillary Clinton, saying what she said about the elections, undermining the confidence of the Russian people in the parliamentarian elections that took place in December of 2011 in the lead up to the president election of 2012 that brought Vladimir Putin back into power? Am I saying that Russia's a perfect democracy? No. Even the Russians don't say it's a perfect democracy. The Russians say it's a Russian democracy. It's a Russian democracy largely shaped by the interference of the United States. 1994, Mr. Mary, who is the charge of the affairs, head of political affairs in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, wrote a long memorandum, the new long memo, long telegram. And he basically chastised the United States for destroying Russian democratic institutions because we wanted to keep, Boris Yeltsin in power. So we prevented Russia from becoming a democracy at the very time they could have become a democracy. But we allowed Boris Yeltsin to suppress. How did he suppress God? He put frickin' tanks in the road in October of 1993 and fired on the Russian parliament. He sent troops into the parliament to kill Russian democratic leaders who disagreed with his policies. And then we helped him cook the new election to re-elect a new parliament. I mean, we have destroyed every institution in Russia, economically, politically, everything. We created a basket case on purpose. And Vladimir Putin raised them out of this. And he did so, and the Russian people love him for this. Yeah, was there a majority or a minority of Russians who believed in all the lies of the West? Yeah. And guess what happened after the special military operation began? 900,000 of them fled. Because they didn't want to be part of Vladimir Putin's Russia. Where'd they flee to? Europe, the United States. And what's happening now? The vast majority of them have already returned to Russia, saying we made a mistake. We want back. We want to be part of that. We don't want to be part of this. The other ones are getting ready to get kicked out and trampled on. These cowards, or they'll just sell their souls to Mikhail Khodorkovsky in his little MI6 run institution in London, or hang out with Gary Kasparov and that crowd, undermining Russian democracy. But the West, we fool ourselves. We believe the stupidity of our own propagandists. The reality of what we've been doing to Russia for the past 50 years, 60 years, should sicken everybody, because we have not been trying to help Russia. And here's the irony of it. The damn Russians still extend a hand of friendship. The Russians still say, okay, can't we just get along? Can we find a way to get along? My God, if it weren't for the patience and just the basic humanity of Russia, we'd be at war today. Because if this was the United States being treated the way Russia is being treated, we'd have taken these nations off the face of the earth. We would never tolerate it. Europe would never tolerate it. Russia has tolerated it and thrived in the process. I mean, could you imagine how amazing Russia would be today if we hadn't done all the things we did to them? If we just allowed Russia to be Russia on its own volition, not sanctioning their economy, letting their economy function the way it should function, letting Russian democracy evolve the way it should evolve. Could you imagine what Russia would be like today? There's a hell of a lot of corruption in Russia today. A hell of a lot of corruption. I'm not picking on the Russians. They acknowledge it. You just read the newspapers. They arrest this general. They arrest this governor, this lieutenant governor. There's corruption in Russia today. Why? Because Russia was an inherently corrupt state because of what we did to it in the 1990s. And when Vladimir Putin came into president, you can't just clean house overnight. You have to deal with the reality you have. The reality he had was an inherently corrupt Russia dominated by these thieving, scheming oligarchs, the scum of the earth. Nothing good about any of these oligarchs. They stole money, and they stole money in a way, just so people understand, they deliberately stole money from the pensioners, the retired Russians who won the Second World War. There's a great untold story. When I say great, I mean great in terms of the size of it, not in terms of how good it is. It's a horrible story about what happened to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these pensioners, the men and women who saved Russia, who saved the Soviet Union through their sacrifice, the people who fought on the front lines, the women who labored in the factories to produce the weapons that were used by the soldiers who sacrificed their lives on the battlefield. These are the people that were cherished by the Soviet Union, people who were respected by the Soviet society. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia learned to hate itself. And one of the first things Russia did is turn their backs on these pensioners, because people like Jeffrey Sachs, who won't admit it today, his role, but Jeffrey Sachs went in and helped create a system where the safety net fell out from the Russian people. And so these millions of pensioners were abandoned. And then what happened? Organized crime came in and took advantage of them. It came up with the coroner and the chief of police. And basically, apartments would become abandoned. How were they abandoned? Well, the Russian mob would find out where the pensioner is. The children, long since abandoned them, they were by themselves, and they'd take them out to a hill and they'd shoot them, dump their bodies, and come back in and get the apartment declared to be abandoned. And then they'd get this thing. The other thing that would happen too is that people like Khodorkovsky would go in, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, all this property was state property. So everybody got a voucher because it belonged to the people. And the people all got vouchers that said it's like having shares. But they're starving. They're starving and they can't eat, and there's no health care, there's no nothing, and they need to get something. So then these oligarchs would come in and go, well, we'll buy your shares. Here, we'll give you enough rubles to buy some bread right now. When you're starving and you're looking at a piece of paper and you don't realize that eventually this paper will be worth something, but right now you have a piece of paper and you're starving to death. You say, here's my paper, give me some food. Now, next month, they're still hungry. Now, they no longer have their paper and nobody's taking care of them. So they take them out and they shoot them. All right. This is what the oligarchs did. They are responsible for the murders of millions of Russians. Millions of Russians. They're despicable human beings. But they ran the Russian economy and they couldn't be ignored. So Vladimir Putin had to deal with them. He had to work with them. He had to control them. He had to bring them under control. He had to get them to reinvest. And it was a constant struggle. In fact, the Russians were still stealing billions of dollars or rubles from the Russian economy up until the special military operation, when one of the greatest things the West did was sanction the oligarchs. And Putin went, good. And now you've lost all that money you took out of Russia? Oh, I'm so sorry. You can talk to the Europeans about that. We're not coming to your defense. But if you want to continue to work in Russia now, the rules have changed. You don't take any money out of Russia. Everything gets reinvested back into Russia, and it's all done legally. And so they're starting to clean up the corruption. But the corruption was systemic, and Russia's still working on it. Russia's not perfect today at all, not even close. But they're a hell of a lot better today than they were when Vladimir Putin took over, and they're heading on a great trajectory that will become even greater if this war would stop. But people are betting on the fact that Russia's going to collapse. Russia's not going to collapse. The society is 100% behind the leadership, which is 100% committed to ensuring the safety and stability of Russia going forward. But this requires Europe to stop treating Russia as this resource that can be broken up. It requires the United States to stop viewing Russia as an enemy and start viewing Russia as a force of stability, which the United States is now doing. Europe is opposed to that. But people need to deal with the Russian reality. And the best way to deal with the Russian reality is go to Russia. Go to Russia. It's not hard. I can do it, and my government doesn't want me to do it. You can go to Russia, and once you get into Russia, they will treat you well. They will treat you fairly. They will not be running you through Potemkin villages. They will let you go to almost any place you want to go. You can't go to secret military facilities. Don't try. They will arrest you and put you in jail. But if you want to go to Novosibirsk, go to Novosibirsk. You want to go to Yekaterinburg, go to Yekaterinburg. If you want to go to Omsk, go to Omsk. If you want to go out to Yakutia, go to Yakutia. Go to Vladivostok. Go to Sakhalin. Go to Kamchatka. Go to Altai. Go see Russia. Meet the Russian people. Listen to the Russian people. Hear what they have to say. See what they have to show you. And you'll know the Russian reality. Don't be a Gilbert Doctorow and hang out with a bunch of 80-year-olds in a cafe somewhere who are going to reminisce about the glories of past times. Don't do that. Go hang out with the real Russian people. Go to the local market, the one where you don't go to the 5-star hotels, although if you have the money, why not? But go to the 3-star hotels. And when you leave the 3-star hotels, walk across the street, go down two blocks, and you'll see the grocery store. And go down in the grocery store and hang out with the people. I did that every night I was in Russia this last time. I just hung out and talked to the shop owner. And I looked at the people coming in. These are people out the streets. These aren't the elites. These aren't the rich people. And I would just have conversations with them. How you doing? How are things going? Hey, want to talk about the price of coffee? Because that was one of Gilbert Doctorow's pet peeves. So I said, hey, let's just talk about coffee, the price of coffee. What have you seen on prices? And they'll have an honest conversation with you. They'll say, oh, we're making more money now, but it's costing more. And that indirectly supports the idea of an overheated, economy that Vladimir Putin's struggling to bring under control right now. But of course it's overheated when you elevate defense industry levels to where they are right now, and you inject money in. You have to acquire talented people. You have to pay them more, so you're injecting a lot more cash into the economy. But there, as Vladimir Putin again said, I wish people would listen to this guy. He says we live in a market economy. It's about supply and demand. We can't manipulate the market because that's actually bad for the market. We can try and bring prices under control by creating stable conditions for the market. But if we come in and start, controlling prices here, we start disrupting the natural flow of the market economy. This is the reality. The market will correct itself. Sometimes it's a painful period of correction, but it will correct itself. This is the reality of Russia. I saw it firsthand. And I would advise people to do it. And you say, well, why? Because if you don't, especially if you're European, you can be dead soon. Because there's idiots in Europe right now talking about attacking Kaliningrad as a way of getting back to the Russians. The Russians will take you off the map.